Okay, welcome back. So this is our VM server. That is the Active Directory domain controller for the domain. And you see the left side, it has other server roles, DNS, and file and storage services. So you might wonder, in our past videos, believe that the ADDS was the only role that was installed, but why there is DNS and file and storage services. So for DNS, it comes with the ADDS installation along with the other features such as group policy management. So that is why if you go to tools, you also have this group policy management. Now, as for the file and storage services, so if you would like to ask, if you go back to dashboard and we go to add roles and features and we go to the add roles wizard, if you click next and go to the selection of the roles, you'll notice that the checkbox was only for the ADDS and DNS, but pre-installed, so it comes with the server, Windows Server. So if you'll notice the file and storage services, 2 out of 12 were already installed, and that is the file server itself, and the other one is the storage services. So it's already pre-checked for us. So that is why we have this file and storage services appearing here, but it's only 2 out of 12. So there are more, I will say, services that needs to be installed on or to be checked on the file and storage services role. So for this video, our task is to create a shared folder wherein under that shared folder, so let's say we have created, or we will create a shared folder under Windows Drive C, or the C partition, because we don't have any partition. So normally you have an extra partition for your data wherein all your files will be there, or a map network drive that is pointing to a network attached storage, or a clustered shared volume, something like that. But in our case, let's keep it simpler or simple. That is why we will just create a shared folder here, and under that shared folder we will have two folders, one for sales and one for finance, for the respective security groups. So just to recap, so if we go to tools, Active Directory, users and computers, so we have already two OUs, one for finance, one for sales OU. Under the OU, we have the finance group, wherein we have only the single user as a member. Hopefully, if we go to finance group, member is the Inquiry Finance user. It should be the same case on the sales OU. So one sales OU, one group, and hopefully the Inquiry Sales is a member of that particular group. So we will log in as sales, as inquiry.sales with the password, and as well as for finance on our client joined domain computer or client computer. So Inquiry Finance also bears the account inquiry.finance and with that particular password. So first I will go to the traditional way of doing that task, which is via the Windows Explorer or the File Explorer, and not going through this file and storage services. And you'll go to the shares here. So later on we'll show you how to do that on via this step or via this method. So we'll go to the File Explorer, Windows Explorer, we'll go to Drive C, and let's create the shared folder here. Okay, so we will create our shared folder. Again, we don't have any extra partition, again for demonstration purposes only, so we have only single partition in our server, so not the ideal, yes, obviously, but again for demonstration purposes only. So the requirement was to create a a shared folder named share, but since I will demonstrate two methods, okay, one is going to the traditional, so perhaps I will make it or name the folder, let's say share one, okay, for method number one. Okay, so that's your first step. is to create a folder. So just your regular creation of folder, right click folder and rename it or name it as the appropriate folder name. Next is to configure the folder sharing settings and security settings. So you could highlight to the folder and go to properties, and from here you have the share properties. So you'll go to the two tabs, the sharing and security. So sharing is the first one that we will configure, and thereafter we will touch on security. So go to the properties, so right click properties, then sharing, then we'll configure here. Okay, so next is you have two choices. You have to go to share, or either you go to advanced sharing. So if you go to share, so basically you just find the appropriate users, let's say domain users, okay, and find people, sorry. So okay, so you have domain users, check name, and once you have that, you will click add and you set permission. But you'll notice that I didn't add it because I won't go to the first option, which is to go to the share, but rather I will go to advanced sharing, which has more advanced settings than the regular share. So you'll notice once we go advanced sharing, we could rename the share name as not the folder name. We can also limit the number of simultaneous users, some comments, and finally what's important is the permissions for the share. Okay, so let's go with advanced sharing. So in advanced sharing, so again you could check the share this folder. Next is you can opt with the folder name share one, or your folder name and share name could be different. So again, just to simply illustrate, I could make this as share option one. Again, just for demonstration purposes, I could have it share one, but just to illustrate to you that I could have a share name that is different from the folder name. So let's just click apply and let's just hold on that, then we'll continue with the permissions. Okay, next agenda will be permissions. So you have one user here, or not really a user but a group, which is everyone, and it has the read condition or read permission. So we need to add either again the domain users, since we are in a domain. So you just type in domain user, check name, and make sure it's underlined or it's detected that it's really there. But I would like to go with authenticated user rather than domain users. Okay, so authenticated users. So click OK. So I will grant change so it can do a write and not only just simply read, or I could have full control. Okay, so again, this is the first of the permissions only, the first door. So you have sharing permission and the security permission. So it could be change, could be full control. Again, for to make it this demo simplistic, you have full control for the authenticated users. Then you could also opt to remove the everyone here. Okay, so let's remove the everyone. So only remaining is the authenticated users with a full control or change or read. So it could not have a list permission, let's say read only, because if the first permission is read, so subsequently it won't have that right permission. So full control on the first door, which is a share permission for the authenticated user. So apply and click OK. So next, after sharing, so we cannot end simply just for sharing permission, but we need to configure also the security tab. So security, so you'll notice the default group or usernames that has some permissions to this shared folder, share one. Again, we can also go to here, edit, and add the respective permissions that you would like, but then again, we would prefer to go to advanced. So in advanced, we'll discuss in a while. So we'll have the share name or the folder name, then the owner of this folder, and you'll have the permissions. You can also see the share. permission and as well as the security permission who has authenticated users. It has also these users, incognito users, and you have other settings as well. Okay, the important thing that you need to take note if you look at the applies to column. So let's say authenticated users. So this authenticated user has the modify access to this folder, which is the share one, and not only this folder but also the subfolders, meaning to say if we create subfolders inside share one, the sales and finance, and finally you have the files, meaning to say the files that are inside the subfolders or even the inside the folder. So they will have modify permissions. So we need to disable inheritance. Disable inheritance meaning to say don't want to have the access will flow through the subfolders and the file. I would like to give permission up to the folder, and thereafter I could add or subsequently add custom permission to whichever group that we would assign. Okay, to add more explanation, meaning to say I would like the authenticated users, which is the combination of whatever security groups, whether you are sales user or finance user, or whether you are an IT user or whatever user in the future that are created on the domain controller. But on the subsequent subfolder, let's say sales subfolder, we don't want the authenticated users, which encompass all the users, to have access which is modified. So it defeats our purpose of the permission, wherein sales folder or sales subfolder should only be accessed by the sales group, and subsequently the file for or the folder for finance should only be accessed by the finance group, especially for confidentiality of the files, whether it's sales or finance, irrespectively whatever their functions, it should be adhering to sensitivity, confidentiality of their files. So only an appropriate group or respective group should have access to the respective files. Okay, so now we'll click on disable inheritance. So next is you will be asked what would you like to do with the current inherited permissions. So obviously you have two options here. You have remove and you have convert. So if you have to remove, you have to be mindful that all of these permissions will be gone. So basically it's safer to convert the inherited permissions here and convert it to explicit, then subsequently remove what are not being used, rather than to do it manually for you of all the permissions. That's also okay if you are an advanced user and you know what you really want to do. Then you can just remove and add the correct permissions or the appropriate permissions. But again, for us as a start, let's just convert inherited permissions. Okay, and apply and okay. Okay, next will be to edit the current permission entries. So let's say for authenticated users, we don't want to have this applies to. So you highlight on this and click edit, and applies to, we will restrict it to this folder only. Okay, so click OK. I will just have the system to be renamed administrators. I don't mind. Okay, the domain administrators. In some circumstances that are very confidential, then would need. Then users, you could remove this entry. Okay, so users, and perhaps you can also put in this folder as well, or remove, but let's just put in this folder as long as the inheritance will not flow through. So users, authenticated users, will be up to this folder only. So click apply and click OK. Now before we proceed further, let's just click OK, and let's just inspect first if what setting changes in the setting that we've done, what is the effect. Let's just create a sample folder here. So let's say sample, or you don't even need to name it, since we'll just delete this one. We just need to inspect what happens when we disable inheritance. So if you right click properties, and if you go to security, so you notice the authenticated users and the users, because we edit from their access to from this folder to subfolder to files, we edit it and we convert it to this folder only, meaning to say up to share 1, there is no inheritance of that permission anymore to the sample folder, so or the subsequent subfolders. So therefore you don't see authenticated users here, which what we wanted, because suppose this is the finance folder or the sales folder, whatever the case, then all of the authenticated users will still be able to read or at least list what is inside the particular folder. So this is what we wanted. So we click cancel and let's just click delete, or we can even rename it to the sales folder, but again let's just delete and let's just start from scratch to the subfolders that we wanted. So finally we are now on the creation of the subfolders. So let's have sales and let's have finance. Okay, so we have two folders, sales and finance. We could also demonstrate having a common folder wherein two departments will have access to that common folder, but again let's just stick to this finance and sales for the moment and assign appropriately which department or which group could access this. Okay, so let's go to finance, right click. So no need to do sharing here because you have already shared the main folder. So normally I'll see some typical mistake. They share the main folder, they also share the finance folder or whatever subfolder, so you don't need to reshare again. You already have the share one or the main folder as shared. You just grant the security permissions for the user or group of users that you wanted to. So best scenario is don't add individual users, add the group. So I could add Inquirinity Finance user or Inquirinity the finance group itself, but it's better for maintenance purposes to add only the group and rather than the user. So you don't come off boarding time when that user resigned. You don't need to find that folder again and remove the appropriate user or off-boarded user. You just need to go to the Active Directory and remove the user from the group, and that's it already. Okay, so let's add. Okay, I could also grant here, but don't need already since we can just simply add from the simplistic add here. So add, and you'll just search finance. So you just be careful what group that you are adding, especially if the folders have already files in here. So we're adding finance group. So I don't want to have full control because I don't want to delete or anything the folder itself. So modify, and I could even go to the advanced later to show, but for now let's add a finance group and click OK on here. Let's check what is in advanced. So if we go advanced, okay, so advanced, and you select this one and you go to the permissions and edit, and you'll notice this folder and subfolder. So if you can also still further drill down to what you really need. Okay, so full control, or you can also show advanced permissions. So there's no change permission or take ownership. That's what we wanted. So there's delete. Okay, there's delete subfolders, should be okay. So don't have full control. So without full control, you don't have this change permission, take ownership, which what you wanted as an IT, that they cannot simply change the ownership of this particular folder. Okay, so that is what is in advanced. So that's why what I said, that just going to this fulfills what we wanted. Okay, but obviously if you are an advanced user, you could also go to the advanced and drill down, especially in this inheritance or this folder, subfolders, and files setting again. So next is we go to sales. So without further delay or ado, and we have already explained it, so now is to add the sales group. So maybe perhaps sales, because we don't know, or I forget the spelling, GRP or just group. Okay, so it's GRP, so that's okay. And again, I don't want to grant the full control, just simply modify, click apply, click OK. So again, to review, okay, it's a good thing to review also. So permissions that authenticated users can still come in from the share one, but here on the security, only finance group. Okay, then sales will only be the sales group. Okay, again, don't mind administrators, because yeah, we grant them to have that inheritance, or these will still see. But yeah, we can also make it more secure. I will say that you can also remove, but again, to make this simple, we have finance and sales group, and we trust the administrators to don't do anything funny on their these folders. Okay, so next will be, let's say, let's have some files here. So I don't have any files, so just create some files here. So finance fin1, okay, so, or just rename it to fin1. Okay, if I can type correctly without the symbols. So fin1, then another file, fin2, then perhaps another subfolder. So let's say, okay, subfolder 1 finance. Okay, so let's just add some objects inside the finance folder. Now let's take a look if the permissions will still flow through. Okay, so we would wanted that finance group should still have permissions to here. So let's say right click properties, and we go to security, and indeed the finance has still permissions to the file. It should be the same on finance to file. Okay, you have the finance group, then you have also the subfolder, which is the folder itself. And yes, so files and folders or subfolder, no issues. The finance group is also having some access to it. Let's do quickly for sales. So basically we'll just create the same thing. So let's just create sales 1. Let's just create another one, sales 2. Perhaps a different one. Sales likes to have some pictures or bitmap image again, but this one is a sample only. So let's say sales picture. Okay, just again for testing purposes, and some subfolders for sales. So subfolder 1 sales, and again just to quickly inspect whatever folder properties, the security, the sales group will be here. Okay, so we can test edit, but I'm an administrator user, so it's not a good way to test. So the best way to test is of course to the user, at the perspective of the user itself. So whether they can first access the share, second access the correct subfolder, which is their group folder, and finally whether they can read list, or they can put in some files, right, or they can change, or they can delete the particular file. So let's prove it, or let's test it on the client computer. So we are at the client computer. So to prove, hostname is the VM client, not the VM server. And again, our IP address is 10.020.100. So let's have the IP config /all to know our DNS. So this is our DNS server 10.0.10.10, which is the VM server. So CLS. So ping VM server perhaps. So that will be our server. So VM server. Okay, so we're done with command prompt. So we are now at our file explorer, Windows Explorer. So obviously the share is not inside your C partition, it's on the C partition of the server, and it's being shared to you. Okay, so how to access it? So basically you have to type // so I could do the name, because you notice in our ping we could ping the name. So VM server, and let's take a look, and we see that there is share option 1. Again, the folder name was share 1, but the share name that we have configured is the share option 1. So if we click on it, and again just to illustrate the user here, so let's go to CMD. And although it says Infinity Finance, but let's just put here the who am I. Then yes, I'm logged in as a domain user, Infinity domain, and my username or account is infinity.finance. So I'm a finance user. So I'll double click on this, and I could see the two folders, finance and sales. Okay, now is the time to test. So which is, I should be able to access finance, but I should not, again, should not be able to access the sales because I am from finance, for example. So let's have that rule. Let's say, so finance, yes, I could access the finance. I could list what's inside. I could, before I modify, let me test first if I can create another file, fin3. And yes, I could create fin3. Could I modify the other files? Let's say from fin2 to fin4, yes. And finally, could I delete something? Okay, so let's say, let's delete fin1. And yes, are you sure? And yes, then was able to delete. So listing, creating or writing and changing the existing and deleting is able to. But how about on sales? So we should not be able to access the sales folder. So if we go back to share option, if we double click this or go inside, double click, and yes, that's what we expected. So you do not have permission, cannot access. So Windows cannot access, but you cannot access really. You do not have permission to access the VM server share option sales. So please contact your network administrator or your server administrator, because actually that's the correct behavior because you are from finance. So what we need to do to prove the other one is we need to sign out with this finance user and log in as the sales user. Okay, so we are back on the VM client. Okay, so we are still at the VM client host name, but this time we are logged in as the inquiry.sales user. Similarly, so we go to the VM server, so // VM server, enter, and we are able to see the share option 1 from the point of view of the inquiry.sales user. Double click, and we still see the two subfolders. And let's click sales first. If we can enter, yes, we are able to enter the sales folder, and you can see the files that are listed here. Can we create a new folder or file? So for example, sales 3. Yes, we are able to. Can we edit the existing file, sales picture, to become sales picture 2? Yes. And can we delete the file? And yes, indeed, we are able to have the file operations. So read, write, or change and delete to the sales folder because we are from the sales group. Finally, we go to finance, or you go back to share option 1, our shared folder, and similarly, let's test if we can access finance. So let's say, oh, I'm curious, I'm from sales, I'm curious with our company standing where we are. Okay, finance. But unfortunately, okay, which is correct behavior, a sales user should not be able to access that finance because that's our task, or what is the requirement. Not only finance group could access finance, and similarly sales could only access the sales group.